in her room for hours, asking God why He created her in the first place. She even attempted suicide severally, but she still failed at her attempts. It seemed she was born to fail. She earnestly wished she could be like the rest of them.
Welcome back to Tales from Moreni KG. If you are new here, this is Tales from Moreni KG. Do well to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.
Once upon a time, the people of Ewekowebe grew beautiful and they all blossomed. They were very productive and fruitful. Many people from all around them depended on them for survival. Red Cashew was a young lady who was Mrs. Cashew's husband's niece. She was born after Mrs. Cashew was married into the family. She was young and beautiful, so she was the delight of many. Mrs. Tomatoes was a beauty to behold. She was health to the bones of men. She was very fruitful, and her children were juicy and attractive. They saved many from starving, so she was loved by many. And Mr. Odon, he was the most patronized in the community. He had a radiant appearance, all green, huge and well built. Mr. Odon was firm and well rooted in the land. He would accommodate many people all at once, shielding them from the scorch of the sun. He provided them with comfort, so whenever they came to him, they would forget their problems while they buried themselves in Ayuolopon and various games, gisting and jesting. But Mrs. Cashew, she was different. She was not as beautiful as others, neither was she fruitful. She had no contribution to make to the community. She was only occupying space for many years. This made her despised by her people. No one loved her. They all avoided her, and she was forbidden from attending social gatherings because she was believed to bring bad luck. She seemed to be the one who took upon herself all other person's problems, while her goodness was shared to them as bonus. Her growth was slow. While her younger ones had reached puberty, she was still struggling to walk. When she eventually walked, she remained like a dwarf for many years. And after her 6 siblings got married and started giving birth, her parents married her off to Chief Manuel. They thought getting her married to him would aid her growth, but it remained the same. She remained barren for many years. Chief Manuel had 4 other wives, and they were all fruitful except her. Her co-wives and their children would mock her, and she would cry in her room for hours, asking God why He created her in the first place. She even attempted suicide severally, but she still failed at her attempts. It seemed she was born to fail. She earnestly wished she could be like the rest of them, especially like Mrs. Tomatoes, who was loved by all, or Red Cashew, who was extremely fruitful despite her being young and tender, or Mr. Odon, who was greatly useful to the community. It was during a rainy season. The rain came with so much force that year. A lot were affected by the rain. Mrs. Tomatoes, who was of a light frame, despite her beauty and the juicy children she had, she was shaken by the wind and swept away by the rain. The people were sad and they mourned, but they soon moved on. Red Cashew She had begun to bear children despite being young and tender. People usually flock around her because of her sweet and plump children. They would do anything to reach and have a taste of them. She was too beautiful, too attractive to be ignored, so they did not mind her being fragile. One evening, the people struggled to reach her beautiful and attractive children. So they struggled to take them out of her bosom. As they struggled, they broke her arm and left her wounded. She became more light and fragile. Later, when the rain fell, the wind blew so much that Red Cashew was thrown out of the land. If all these people could be destroyed by the rain, who was Mrs. Cashew to remain? The people expected that she would be wounded, better still, killed. But they did not know that all the while she was ignored. She had begun to grow slowly but steadily. She had grown strength and deep roots. She had quietly gotten pregnant a couple of times, but she suffered miscarriages. After she saw how that many of the people she envied and who they thought were better than her, how they were affected, wounded, and some killed by the rain, she became grateful for her life for the very first time. She began to believe in herself. She realized her uniqueness and how that others lacked what she had. And she understood how that her slow growth was a steady one that was necessary for her to develop strength and capacity. Mrs. Cashew gradually became a cheerful and confident woman. She began to dance to the music of the wind and smile at the rising of the sun. At the arrival of the rain, she would dance and jump in it. She understood herself better and embraced her uniqueness. However, the people were still unwilling to have anything to do with her, but she was unbothered. At the end of the rainy season, the people only had food that would last them for just a month. Most of them had been washed away along with their produce by the rain. Soon, famine began and there was nothing in the reserve, not even crops to reproduce. The people were dying and children were starving. At this point, Mrs. Cashew began to produce children. Her children brought with them nuts bigger than anyone had ever produced in Iwekuwebe. Their juice was sweeter than anyone they had ever had. Mrs. Cashew then became the benefactor of her people. She fed them and began to trade her nuts in neighboring communities. The once rejected and ridiculed woman became the strongest woman who rescued the entire land of Iwekuwebe and neighboring communities from famine. And many years later, Mrs. Cashew outlived most of her contemporaries. She also continued to bear children until she died. Her children, they also became strong and well established. Treasured one, here are my moral lessons for you. Number 1, what you think you do not have does not matter. What you have part time is what matters for you to do life. Number 2, do not rush out of your growth process. Do not abort it. When trees begin to bear fruit, they attract men. If they are not strong enough, they get broken. When you step out too early, you might bear fruit. However, the attraction and patronage you get can get you wounded because you haven't acquired enough strength, knowledge, and wisdom required to stay out.
What moral lessons did you pick from the story? Kindly drop them in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye until next time.